Okay, so now we have finally made it to the last part of section of this particular chapter. We are going to now jump into the Readline-sync part. Now, we're going to go through the curriculum. I'm going to take you through it on the steps that you need to do to better understand how this works. So pay attention to this, because this is going to help you, especially when it's time for you to do your assignments. Okay, if you are new to this channel and you're not in the cohort, the curriculum will be in the description. It's a free textbook. You can follow along. It doesn't cost anything. So again, you can share these videos with all your friends and family, anyone that would love to learn about coding and get a taste of it to see if it's something that they may enjoy. You're welcome to share it with them as well. It's a great resource, and again, it's free. So let's get into the curriculum. So here we go. Input with Readline-sync. Console.log works fine for printing static, unchanging messages to the screen. And what that means is basically it's hard coding information. It's not dynamic. If we want to print a phrase greeting a specific user, then console.log hello Dave will be okay, as long as Dave is the actual user. What if we want to greet someone else? We could change the string inside to the parentheses to be hello Sarah or hello Elastigirl, or any other name we need. However, this is inefficient. Also, what if we do not know the name of the user beforehand? We need to make our code more general and be able to respond to different conditions. It would be great if we could ask the user to enter a name, store that string in a variable, and then print a personalized greeting using console.log. Variables to the rescue. Now, we've been talking about variables in this particular chapter. Now, understand the key phrase here when we say store the string in a variable. Remember, a variable is a container. We store everything in a container. When you get used to this and understanding how this works, we create variables pretty much for everything. Like I said, they are the lifeblood of every programming language. Now, it's no different here, because we need a variable to store the information that we want to receive from a user. So you want to definitely understand how powerful variables are. Now, here, requesting data. To personalize the greeting, we have to get input from the user. This involves displaying a prompt. Here's a key word for you: displaying. When you think of displaying, we want something to be printed to the UI or something for the user to interact with. 9 times out of 10, not 9 times out of 10, but right now you're learning to use console.log to print or display information to the user. A prompt on the screen: please enter a number, and then waiting for the user to respond. Whatever information the user entered gets stored for later use. As we saw earlier, each programming language has its own way of accomplishing the same task. For example, the Python syntax is input, please enter your name, while C# uses console.readline. Notice the syntax here. Right here, I want you to understand something early on. Yes, in the beginning, you're going to want to remember the syntax, but I'm here to tell you that is not going to help you in the long run. You want to understand how it works. Like I was saying about the console.log. Console is an object. Log is a method. When I look right here in C#, That same console, but notice it has a capital C, is an object. And readline is another function or method. And so here it's the same process, but it has a different syntax. It gets the same results, but it has a different syntax. When you just try to memorize the syntax, you're going to be confused. Because if I come with a different scenario, but I'm expecting the same results, you're going to be confused because you're going to be trying to understand how does this syntax work with this scenario, when you need to understand how the whole process works, because each syntax can be altered and modified. So you need to understand how it works. So here, JavaScript also has a built-in module for collecting data from the user called Readline-sync. This is a module, it's a built-in module. Unfortunately, using this module requires more than a single line of code. Now understand, when you get into the real world, you're not going to be using Readline-sync. What we're using Readline-sync for right now is to help you understand how it works. So now this same rule and principle that you're learning here, you can apply it to any other rule and principle, any other syntax, as long as you understand how it works. Now, we said syntax. Gathering input from the user requires the following setup. Notice here, we got a keyword const. We have the input is a variable, and we're using this special require function, and we're passing in the Readline-sync. Remember, Readline-sync is a module. You need this particular function in order for you to use that module. Now, this is here, syntax. Const is the keyword. That means that it's final. It's not going to change. It's sealed. Input is a variable that I don't want to change, right? So I'm passing in this require, which is being assigned to the input. Require is a special function that you did not create. This is what we call abstraction. It works, and you don't need to know how it works because somebody else made sure that it does work. So we're helping you here by giving you this required function that passes in this Readline-sync. Notice the syntax. It's inside of a quote. It needs that quote in order to get access to that module. And then from there, we're creating another variable, but this time we're using let. So that means this could be changed if we needed to, but we're calling it info. And in info, here we go. We have this object called input. This dot right here is an access modifier, which I will explain more later. But we have right here, we have this object that we get up here that we created called input, and we have another method called questions that you did not write but you can use, and we're passing it in a string which has the text that we want to write to prompt the user. So you're going to ask your question here. Understand this because you're going to use this especially when it's time for the assignments. This is a variable that's holding this function that's passing in the module. Now this is an object. This object right now is getting access from this question method. It's important to understand everything in JavaScript is an object except for the primitive data types. Remember that everything in JavaScript is an object except for the primitive data types. And I'm going to keep hitting you hard with that as we continue to go forward. Now here, there is a lot going on here behind the scenes. But for now, you should follow this bit of wisdom. I turn the key and it goes. This is what we're talking about when we say abstraction. You're already familiar with this concept in life. When you get into your car and you put the key in and you start the engine, all you're concerned with is that that engine starts and the car is able to move. That's what's important to you. That's all you're concerned with. Here it's the same thing. You're not concerned with how this require works because you know that it does work. You're only concerned that it does work. Somebody else has already tested this to make sure that it works, as well as for this questions method as well. Now, most of us do not need to know all the details about how cars, phones, or microwave ovens work. We just know enough to interact with them in our day-to-day lives. Similarly, we do not need to understand how Readline-sync works at this time. We just need to know enough to collect information from a user. As you move through this course, you will learn about all of the pieces that fit together to make this process work. For now, here are a brief overview. Load the module. In line 1, const, which is a keyword and it means final. It means it's immutable. It doesn't change. Input is a variable that we are going to assign. We have the assignment operator, not the equal sign, but the assignment operator, which we're using a function called require. That is, we're passing in it an argument called Readline-sync, which is in quotes. It has to have the quotes. And it says pulls in all the functions that allow us to get data from the user and assign them to the variable input. Recall that const ensures the input cannot be changed. This is some information we do not want to change. How to prompt the user. To display a prompt and wait for a response, we use the following syntax. Let info, which is a variable now, and we're now storing input a dot question, and we're passing in the question. Now this input is again now an object, and I'll keep reinforcing this as we go further. That's being stored in this variable, which also is now an object. Understand variables, if depending on the keyword you use, are mutable. They can be changed, they can be updated, they can be reassigned. The way that you make it final, that you can't change it, it's immutable, is using the keyword const. Now, when JavaScript evaluates the expression, it follows the instructions. Display question text on the screen. Get familiar with that word. Understand when we use that word in some type of example or instructions, you know what we're asking you to do. Wait for the user to respond. Store the data in a variable called info. So let me explain something here. This asks the question. Once the person answers the question, it's now getting pushed and stored into this particular variable. That sometimes is going to be confusing to you in the beginning, but the more you do it, the more you're going to improve. The more it's going to make sense. You got to keep practicing because eventually it's all going to make sense. Now, for our greeting program, we could code let name input dot question into your name. That's what we write in the question, enter your name for the input dot question. Again, get familiar with how to do this. This time we're using a variable name. We want to store a name or the user's input, which will be their name, in the variable called name. See, it's descriptive. We want things to be descriptive. So as a developer, as you come on a high level, you're able to do what? You're able to understand what's going on by reading the variable names. If I just put the letter X right here, I wouldn't know what it does. It wouldn't make sense to me. I may be questioning, why are you doing this? But by giving variable names distinctive names, you're able to help people behind you understand what you were thinking, as well as if you come back to it 3-4 months, 6 months later, you can look at it and remember, oh, that's what I was doing. All right, makes sense? All right, so the user enters a name and presses the return or enter a key, then this happens. Any text entered is collected and by the input function and is stored in the name. Now it's asking us to try it, but before we do that, let's finish reading. Note that after entering a name, the program does not actually do anything with the information. If we want to print the data as part of a message, we need to put name inside of console.log statement. After line 3, add console.log. After line 3, which is, I guess this is line 3. After line 3, we're going to add console.log, and we're going to put in this special string. We're going to go over what this is later on, but for right now, just trust what we're telling you to do. Then run the code several times, trying different responses to the input prompt. By storing the username inside name, we gain the ability to hold on to the data and use it when and where we see fit. Trying to add another plus name term inside of the console.log statement and see what happens. We want you to practice this. Play around with the code so you can get an understanding what's going on. Next, add code to the prompt and use for a second name. Store the response in another name. That means create another variable. Then print both names using console.log. And then we want to try it. And so this is give you an example of what the output should be. Now, critical input details. There is one very important quirk about the input function that we need to remember. Given console.log 7 plus 2, the output would be 9. Remember that? Now explore the following code, which prompts the user for 2 numbers and then prints their sum. Now this is something you want to definitely pay close attention to. Notice here we have a num1 variable and we have input.question and we enter a number. Number 2, input question, enter another number. And then we're going to add these 2 numbers together because remember, we're expecting these to be numbers. Now, run the program, enter your choice of numbers, and examine the output. Do you see what you expected? If you were expecting 7 and 2, we expected an output of 9. We don't expect 72, but that line is the result printing from what's given. This is where we're talking about logical errors. Again, we're going to get into errors later on in a later chapter. We're talking about logical errors here. Why are we talking about logical errors? Because that's not the result we were looking for. Now, this is where you have to understand what happens and what's going on here. And again, you're going to have to play around with this to get an understanding. But let me explain to you what's happening. Inputs, every input, everything is converted to a string. The reason why the output would be 72 and not 9, it didn't add the 2 numbers, because remember that plus operator is a concatenator when it's a string, at least one string. It could be a number, but the other one, if it's a string, it's just going to concatenate the 2 because it can't add the 2. So that's why you got to understand how the plus operator works. So what we're saying is now you got to use what you've learned up until this point. You're going to have to add a number function to convert that string to a number. This is where you're going to have to work at this, to kind of do some research. Go back over the last few videos to understand what we're talking about. So you got to play around with this goal. If we want our program to perform math on on the entered numbers, we must use type conversion. Like I was saying, go back to the type conversion section, watch the video where we talked about it, to change the string value into a number. So here, you're going to try it here. We have a number, use a number function to convert num1 and num2 from strings to numbers. Run the program and examine the results. Instead of using 2 steps to assign num1 and then convert it, combine the steps in line 3. Place input question into number inside the number function. Pay attention to what we just said. All you have to do is place this inside that number function and return the program. Examine the results and repeat steps 2, num2. What happens if a user enters high instead of a number? Again, you have to play around with the code to get a better understanding of how this works. So with that being said, you're going to check your understanding. Now, we've made it to the end of the chapter. We've made it through the end of this section. I hope these videos are helpful. If they are, leave a comment on the videos. Help the algorithm. Help us get more people exposed to this training. It's a free training, a free comprehensive training that they don't have to spend any money for, actually. So again, make a comment. Let me know that these videos are helping, because it takes a lot of work and effort to make these videos, because I want you to be a success. So I'm putting in the effort to help you. Let's put in the effort to help yourself and put in the effort to help others. Okay, that's the end of this video. We made it to the end of the chapter. And so what we're going to do is go to the next chapter later on, but you have to do the studio. Ask questions so you can get a better understanding. Play around with the code. Remember, the more you do, the more you'll improve. Okay? See you in the next chapter.